Have you ever looked at Cyprus and thought, hey, that kind of looks like a flattened out United States? You're not alone. Throughout the world, there are a bunch of countries that have similar shapes. There's also national subdivisions, riverbeds, even lakes that have such similarities with national borders. So let's find out which ones. It might sound a little weird, but if you look at Cyprus from the right angle, it kind of looks like a tiny tilted version of the United States, with that northeastern tail acting like its own Florida. Now throw Georgia into the mix, the country, not the US state, and its long horizontal shape with some jagged edges also gives off similar vibes. It's like these three took the same shape template and just changed the scale and aspect ratio. All the way in the Caribbean, we have another example with Hispaniola, the island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic, which looks surprisingly similar to Kyrgyzstan. Both have a kind of stretched out, rugged shape with a central hump and ends that taper off like wings. If you swapped their labels on a map and squinted a little bit, you might not really notice the differences. Back in Europe, Austria and Armenia don't just share mountains and an odd love for classical music, they also have a pretty similar shape. Both look like a lopsided, uneven S shape with one end larger than the other. They're small, twisty, and slightly awkward in shape, but very, very similar. In another example, if you trace the Nile River as it flows through Egypt from south to north, it forms a long, curving shape that's oddly similar to the country of Vietnam. They're both tall, skinny, and snake along a sort of central spine. One just happens to be a river and the other a whole country. Similarly, Lake Michigan and Sweden both have that tall vertical shape with a wide top, a skinny middle, and a more chunky base. The lake almost looks like someone modeled it off the Swedish borders. Kosovo and Montenegro, two Balkan neighbors, are also weirdly similar. Their borders are irregular and jagged, but if you rotate them a bit, they start to look almost identical. And unlike other examples on this list where you have to adjust the size for the comparison to be viable, in the case of these two, they're also almost exactly the same size, adding a second layer to their similarity. Luxembourg, Barbados, and Liechtenstein are similar cases. These three are shaped kind of like drops of water, rounded at the top, narrower at the bottom. Whether in Europe or the Caribbean, they all got the same compact look going on. Within the US, if you rotate Wisconsin a bit, it starts to look a lot like the African country of Tanzania. Both have a bulky body and a little bit that sticks out on the right side, Wisconsin's Door Peninsula, which mirrors Tanzania's eastern coast. And speaking of US states, West Virginia and Afghanistan also look really similar. They're uneven shapes with a handle sticking out of the top. That northern finger of West Virginia kind of mirrors the northeast panhandle of Afghanistan, which I think stretches into China. Burkina Faso also looks like a tiny central version of the Central African Republic with a broad horizontal shape. One's a little more curved, the other is more angular, but both have that same slanted rectangle feel to them. I think it's so fascinating how countries can be so far apart geographically but look so similar. And speaking of things that look similar but have very different effects, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Bluegrass. Bluegrass was nice enough to send over these 3 physician-formulated sprays, and while their packaging looks alike, they're different on the inside. One of them covers nail and hair strength, the other your immune system, and the other your energy. They also have at least a 4th one that helps you sleep better. And speaking of even more things that are different, Bluegrass differs from their competitors in the fact that they use these spray formulas rather than having to use pills to achieve these results. You just apply these in spray form under your tongue. There's no waiting around. Drift Away is particularly interesting because it can help you sleep, and Unlike some other sleep aids, you can use it in the middle of the night if you wake up and can't fall back asleep. All of this with no grogginess or hangover because they're 100% natural. It contains only melatonin, GABA, and valerian root. The energy one is a B12 boost. That's all that it is. And the immune response system is basically vitamin C and zinc, and it's a great way to maybe help you prevent getting sick. If you want to try them out and see if these natural options help you with any of these issues, make sure to do it through the link below using code GK10 for 10% off. And now let's get back to the video. Back to the Caribbean, if you take Cuba and flip it upright, suddenly it looks a lot like a smaller Chile. Both are long, narrow slivers of land that stretch across the map like ribbons. One cuts through the Caribbean horizontally and the other along South America's Pacific coast vertically, but their outlines are practically identical. The Brazilian state of Paraná and Romania in Europe are also surprisingly alike. Both look like sideways hearts, kind of, with a larger left side and a slightly droopy right side. Ireland and South Korea also have some similarities, although I would say this one is a little less close than the other ones. They're slightly tilted oval shapes with some rough edges. One is green and rainy and the other is more mountainous, but their shapes are pretty similar. Venezuela and Lithuania are another odd pairing, but again, they both have borders that seem like kind of squashed hexagons. They're wide at the top, a little bumpy along the edges, and slightly lopsided, not identical but definitely in the same geometric family. If you zoom out, the outline of Lithuania actually resembles the general curve of the North African coastline. It's like a smaller landlocked version of it. Argentina and Lebanon both have long, lean bodies running north to south. Of course, Lebanon is incredibly smaller. They've got a graceful coast-hugging shape like vertical commas with a little bit of flair in the ruggedness of the coasts. Algeria and Iraq, again, super similar. Both of them look like blocky shield shapes. They're flat at the top, curved on the sides, and have some jagged bits sticking out where the borders get complicated because of some conflict. If you rotate Iraq a bit, it fits right into Algeria's slot on the map, if you will. Laos and Italy both bend slightly in the middle, creating a soft S shape. Italy has that famous boot curve, while Laos has more of a subtle inland turn, but side by side there's definitely a shared bendy vibe. Peru and Liberia both have a curved coast that wraps inwards, sort of like a claw. Their inland borders puff out, giving both countries a kind of hooked shape. It's like a crab's pincer reaching into each of their respective continents. Albania and Tunisia, although separated by the Mediterranean, look like vertical teardrops with another similarity in their shape, which is this gentle inward curve. While Japan and New Zealand are also very close in shape, two island nations are almost like opposite sides of the same coin, stretched along a north-south axis with curved chains of land and an agglomerate of islands. Japan's a little more tightly packed and has more islands in it. New Zealand is more spaced out with only two main islands, but the overall shape and disposition of said islands is very similar. We could also compare Japan to Vietnam. Both are long and narrow with a dramatic curve like a stretched out question mark. Of course, one is the chain of islands and the other is a coastal country, but they both arc through their corners with the same type of sweep motion. Ukraine and Kazakhstan are both wide and flattish with lots of jagged borderlines and a similar east-west sprawl. They've got that same big butt boxy vibe, like stretched out versions of each other, just flipped and scaled. And Iran and the former Yugoslavia have these uneven shapes with coastal sections on one end and mountains all over. If you tilt the shape of old Yugoslavia a bit, it ends up looking like a bite-sized Iran. Also connecting Asia and Europe, we have Nepal and Portugal. Now, they're pretty different when you look at a normal map, but if you rotate Nepal vertically, it starts to look a lot like Portugal. They're both narrow and a bit curved, with one side that's bumpier than the other. It's like they're distant cousins. One that I found really shocking because of how similar it is the island of Great Britain and China's Shanxi province, which both have this upright, rounded shape. It bulges in the middle, narrows in the ends. If you stick them next to each other, you kind of have to do a double take to see which is which. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons for their direct support, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.